We were going to my son Andrew's soccer game when my mom told me that my hair color was way too red. Well, I remembered liking my hair color that morning when I looked in the mirror, so I ignored her comment. But then 5 minutes later, she told me that my nail polish was too orange. I knew it was this light, frosty bronze, and I wondered if my mom was going colorblind. Well, I turned around to ask her if she was going colorblind, and that's when I noticed she was wearing huge auburn-colored sunglasses. And I realized why everything seemed too orange and too red to her. Later that afternoon, I was telling my husband and my son Joshua what had happened. And my son Joshua waited until everybody was quiet, and then he said something I'll never forget. He said, we can all learn a lesson from this. We need to be careful what we look through before we judge what we see. After I recovered from his wisdom and took it all in, I thought about it and realized he's so right. What we look through really does determine what we see, especially when it comes to living with doubt or living with what I call Godfidence. When we look through the lens of our feelings of inadequacy, we're going to live as though we are inadequate. When we look through the lens of our self-doubts, we're going to live with uncertainty and hesitancy. But when we look through the lens of God's grace and truth, we're going to see possibility and find confidence knowing that even if we are inadequate, God promises to help us. Just this week, I missed 3 appointments in one day, and I really needed this truth. You see, I'd written all of these appointments down on Friday, but they were all on Thursday. They were back-to-back therapy appointments for my little girl, and I felt like such a failure. I'd fallen so short of simply being a responsible mom. But God stopped me in my tracks as I was starting to beat myself up with critical thoughts, and He reminded me to look through the lens of His eyes and give myself some grace. He also reminded me of His promise in Proverbs 24:16, where it says that though the righteous fall 7 times, they rise again. Notice how it says the righteous will fall. Yes, even those of us who've received the gift of Christ's righteousness and redemption, we're going to fall down. We're going to blow it. But we were never intended to stay down. Instead of giving up, God's truth and grace empowers us to get up again. We get up again when we depend on His strength in our weaknesses. We get up again when we learn from our mistakes, remembering that though the righteous fall, we can rise again. Now, how do we rise again? Well, we have to keep looking through the lens of God's truth and grace. Listen to the grace that He offers in Psalm 37:23-24. It says, "The steps of a man," and I would say woman, "are established by the Lord, and He delights in her way. When she falls, she will not be hurled headlong, because the Lord is the one who holds her hand." I love how God says that He is there to take our hand, to hold our hand, and help us up again. You see, the truth is, following Jesus is not about being perfect. It's about accepting our weaknesses and letting them make us more dependent on God's perfect love and power at work in us. And this happens through daily dependence on God's word and His ways as we come to know Him and learn to trust Him more and more each day. In chapter 10, we see this happen with Gideon. When the angel of the Lord went to Gideon while he was hiding in the winepress, we can tell by his response at that point that Gideon only knew about God, but he didn't really know God personally. However, as Gideon took God's hand and got up again, or came out of hiding, we see Gideon starting to look through the lens of God's promise to be with him. And in doing that, Gideon starts to get to know God, and he learns to trust Him more and more each day. And so can you. You're going to learn to trust God's heart by interacting with Him and experiencing His character in personal ways like Gideon did. Remember when he experienced God's peace after tremendous fear? And in that place, he called God, "The Lord is peace." In the same way, you will learn to trust God as you come to know Him in the way that He's described in the Bible based on His character. I love looking at God's names because they reflect a promise of who He is. In fact, I carry a list of several of God's names in my purse and in my journal. This week, when I forgot all those appointments, it helped me to say God's names out loud and look through the lens of His promise of who He is and who He promises to be. Instead of just reading them, I'll actually say, Lord, thank you that you are Emmanuel, my God with me. El Roy, the God who sees me. El Sali, God of my strength. Jehovah Jireh, the Lord who will provide for me. Jehovah Shammah, the Lord is there for me. Let's keep looking through the lens of who God promises to be as Emmanuel, our God with us, by recognizing His presence in our lives every single day. And let's keep growing in our Godfidence as we live in the promise of Psalm 9:10 that says, "Those who know your name trust you, O Lord, because you have never deserted those who seek your help." As we finish this journey together in chapter 10 and 11, let's start praying, Lord, I want to know you for who you really are so that I can learn to trust you and follow you more and more each day. And let's keep holding on to our commitment and God's commandment from Hebrews 10:35 through 36. Do not throw away your confidence. It will be richly rewarded. You must persevere so that when you have done the will of God, which is to believe Him, you will receive all that He has promised.